I want to introduce my colleagues here. For those of you that were on the new Teacher Skull session last night, you already met Ogechi and Ben. But Ogechi Ukazu is a teaching assistant at the University of Texas, where she is under the tutelage of Jerry Junkin. Ogechi, why don't you fill in the gaps? Tell us a little bit more about your background, your where you went to college, your teaching experience, so we get a little bit more about you.
Yeah, this is kind of my second year in the college higher ed world, and I heard somebody wrote a book. Thank you very much, Hannah. I appreciate that. Yes, I'll throw one up. And I'm just completing my first year of my DMA at UT. Before that, I taught my very first year of college teaching at University of Mary Hardin Baylor, which is just about an hour north of Austin. And I've spent my entire teaching career in the Houston area. High school director for 4 years in Cy-Fair ISD and Clear Creek ISD. Before that, I was at Sam Houston State, though. Did my master's with Matthew McInturf, who I know a lot of people here would probably know. If you don't, that's somebody you need to know for sure. Yeah, and before that, I was in Spring ISD teaching middle school band, and I did my undergrad in, of course, music ed at University of Houston. So that's kind of my professional history in a nutshell.
So Ogechi, remind me, what's your instrument?
Trombone.
Trombone, all right.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Well, and we also have Ben Underbrink. Ben is someone I've known for a very long time. I've known him since he was in 6th grade. He was one of my students at Berkner High School, and he went on to do his undergraduate degree at at Texas A&M University at Commerce, about an hour east of Dallas. He's a horn player. Ben, bring us up to speed. What are you doing now?
Yeah, so just finished my second year of teaching at Cypress Woods High School down in Cy-Fair ISD, kind of near the Houston, Texas area. Other than just educational experience, I was on the leadership teams with Frank throughout the past 8 or 9 years, and specifically with System Blue for the past 4, I believe.
Actually, 5 years now, Ben.
Oh, 5 years now?
Yeah.
So, little younger on the teaching experience side of it, but filling in the gaps with getting out there and teaching lessons and working with marching bands and all the leadership camps over the summer.
Well, and the reason I invited Ben and Ogechi specifically to join me is because I wanted to have different ranges of experience and backgrounds. Ben's still fresh in his mind what it was like to be a first-year teacher, but with the perspective of a second-year teacher. And I think that's important because you can reflect more accurately on that first year when you've got a little bit more experience behind you. My apologies if I repeat anything from last night, but I always say that your first year of teaching is uninformed ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. Your second year is informed ignorance, and at least now you know what you don't know. The third year, you finally start to get into a rhythm of things, and you start to find your feet and start to get a feel for what it really is all about. But anyway, I'm excited about the questions. The first one was actually, I believe, directed toward me, well, considering it uses my name in the question. But I want to invite both of you to offer your thoughts. So this question is, how did you continue to push yourself in pursuing your undergraduate degree? I'm in my 6th year. This is my final year. However, I still must take the praxis and student teach. I changed my major to music education as a junior, and I often get discouraged no matter how optimistic I am or how much I apply myself. Well, you are in good company. It took me 7 years, almost 7 years to get my undergraduate degree. I had a gap year after high school. I had some real financial setbacks where I was just barely a full-time student for a number of semesters. And I understand that. I got discouraged as well. I will tell you, where I found my comfort, my strength, and my optimism was in hanging out with other people who were doing what I wanted to do, who still encouraged me and who were eager they saw my desire. They didn't see a lot of talent, but they saw a lot of desire, and they encouraged that. And I even though I wasn't really a teacher, I really hung around with programs. So I started to feel like a teacher, like I started to identify as one before I actually graduated. So if I had to kind of boil it down, I would say that the things that helped me get through the dark days were the people I was around that encouraged me, and simply building a relationship with a local band program where they treated me like I was on staff there. Now, I don't know who asked the question, obviously, or where you're from. If you'd like to email me, perhaps we can brainstorm some ideas specific to your situation and get you hooked up with the right people, or even a program, what band, orchestra, choir, whatever it is, and see if we can't make some connections there. But please, I just want to tell you, the discouragement, the doubt is all part of it. And we all go through that. So, and I'll get you, Ben, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I think your suggestion about reaching out and working with programs is really good, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of flex your teaching muscles, and gives you, it just kind of reminds you why you went into what you do. So that is actually a big one that I did. Nearing the end of my undergraduate career, I taught private lessons. I was out teching places, and just reaching out, observing before, of course, my student teaching, and also attending my, state conference, TBA, TMEA, that stuff helps a ton. It just reinvigorates you, refreshes you. So I think when you're kind of nearing the end, you want to slow down, but that's the time to push. And
Yeah.
Frank, what you said is exactly it. I think, reaching out and just kind of getting out there a little bit will help a ton.
We talked about senioritis, high school.
Yeah.
That's real big, because,
Right.
you get to connect with other slackers, if you're got senioritis. But keep in mind that itis is a suffix which means swollen. So if you got senioritis, it's time to elevate, compress, put some ice on that thing. You don't coast right before you make a big leap.
Right.
You got to keep pushing. And it's easier to push if you got other people to push with. It really is. Because it doesn't feel like you're pushing. You're just going with the flow then.
Right.
You feel like you're pushing when you're alone. When you got other people, it just feels like you're in the momentum. This question, Ben, I'm going to kind of direct to you. I'm a recent college graduate that wants to know your thoughts on the most important characteristics and accomplishments for a first-year band director. And since you failed so miserably your first year, you might share some things by way of counterexample.
Yeah, what not to do, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So is this more directed, I guess, towards post first year or going into that? I think.
Well, it says wants to know your thoughts on the most important characteristics and accomplishments for a first year band director. So I'm thinking that sort of is the goals. So what do you think are good goals for a first year teacher?
Right. I think one of the most important things is establishing yourself as that knowledge in the room, establishing yourself as it doesn't matter how young you look, aka me, and how inexperienced you may be. If you have the knowledge in the room, you are the expert. My friend Garrett Lindholm said that, I think, my second year of teaching on staff with Frank, and I was 18 at the time, and that stuck with me ever since. If I have the knowledge in the room, I'm the expert, and that automatically gave me a lot of confidence. So establishing yourself as the knowledgeable one, but also when you first get in, realizing what the program has to offer the students and latching onto that and figuring out how it runs. I think one of the most important goals as a first-year teacher is to watch how the machine functions, because you have never been a part of something like that. You've never been a part of a staff of 4 or 5 or 6 that you're working with for 12 hours a day for an entire school year. So it's a much different aspect of living, really, than you've ever experienced before. So especially the first few weeks, just watching the others and seeing how they interact with the students, seeing how they interact with each other, the parents, the admin, and work to copy that. And then you'll find your own groove a couple months in. I think the first time I really felt comfortable and like I had my own way of doing things was probably the end of summer marching band. So going into the first couple of days of school, which was great because school was starting and I had the confidence for it, but it's because I sat back and I watched, and then I had the tools that I brought with me from college and past teaching experiences to be able to say, I am the knowledgeable one. So I think those are the two most important things for me.
Ben, your situation is a little bit different too, because you did have a team of people you can learn some from. Right. We have a number of people that we come into contact by way of CSI who are, they're one-person shows. They got to do all themselves. And so in that situation, you may be both the example and the learner at the same time, So if I could give you something just sort of in general, this is the mistake I made as a first-year teacher. I taught junior high, and that was not the mistake. I recommend teaching junior high before you teach high school, if you have the luxury of that option. That's another discussion. But when I was teaching my 7th graders, I spent too much time trying to teach them how to sound good as a band. I was working on ensemble with them. You don't do that with little kids. You got to get them moving around the horn, teach them technique, stretch them, see what they can do. But I was sitting there trying to get a concert F to sound good. So I brought one of my mentors over, Brian Gibbs, who's on the faculty at Sam Houston State. I did my student teaching with him. So he comes over, and I thought he was going to change my grade for student teaching retroactively, because he said, look, he says, what you're doing is fine if you were working with a high school group, but you're working with little kids. They need to learn how to play their instruments. And right now you're teaching them how to play a note. And it's like, after I pulled the dagger from my heart, I realized, okay, time to get better. So there are a couple of thoughts there. So do you really have to be fantastic at your instrument to be a great director?
I'm going to go ahead and say, I think it was Mallory Thompson who said this, which is you need to approach working on your instrument like you're trying to win an orchestral job or something. And I mean, that's how, I mean, there was a point in my college career where I was like, yeah, I can go for these auditions, and I was working really hard at it. And that is one important, that should be an important part of your undergrad, at least, career, is just getting as good as you can get on that instrument. Now, I mean, the word I think they said was fantastic, right? I mean, I don't like, it's a little subjective, right? But I think the purpose of getting good on your instrument is to work on your ultimately to work on your musicianship, which will serve you for the remainder of your career. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, without going into details about about that statement of the word. Fantastic. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
I get excited and I try to cut in. So.
No, sorry. No worries, man. No worries.
Think about it this way. If you were a basketball player, would you rather find a local YMCA teacher, or would you rather get like LeBron James or someone out there to help you?
Right. There you go.
You know, you don't even know him as a guy, but you'd be excited to learn from him because he's good at what he does. So there you go.
There you go.
Good at his craft.
Well, I'm going to be kind of the dissenter on this one. I don't disagree with either of you. I don't disagree. But what I believe is, and I think you both nailed what I'm about to say. It's the process. It's what you're working toward. Okay. We all know people who have worked their butts off to win an audition and still haven't, but they're great players. Right. So now, I was not a great clarinet player. I was a good clarinet player. But I worked to be great. I really did. And what the things that I learned in that pursuit were the things I take with me into my job as a teacher, my job as a band director. Now, I was competent enough to get my instrument out and play for kids and demonstrate things, but I also knew where I needed to rely on some others to fill in those gaps for me. So my response to that question is, no, you don't really have to be fantastic, but you've got to have some credibility. You've got to have some street cred. And otherwise you kind of give your kids permission to be approximate. So the pursuit of excellence is of tremendous value, as long as you're pursuing it conscientiously in the same way you would pursue working with your ensemble.
Yeah.
Here we go. As a white teacher taking over for a black teacher in a school that is majority black, what are some things I should consider as a start to this new venture? Are there any resources or books you recommend for teachers to better serve our black students?
I'll answer that. I think, honestly, the best resource is the situation you're in. And if you're taking over, this is something I would suggest for anyone in any situation where it's taking over, is like your first year or two even is like reconnaissance. You're just figuring out what is going on. And I think we had a question like this last night, right? Where someone was talking about taking over and what they should think about, what they should prioritize. No matter what situation you're going into, it's about observing what's happening and building relationships with your kids before, I think, installing especially anything drastic or different. So your biggest resource, in my opinion, would be the situation and observing as much as you can. And of course, the people in that situation, other teachers, maybe you're working with, other, either in the fine arts or the school population at large. Now, there are books that I've come across, none that I've really read. I'm actually working through a book right now with a book study called White Fragility, which can kind of give you kind of a more global sense of especially when we talk about schools that are predominantly Black, they predominantly tend to have lower socioeconomic demographic, right? So that could give you some context for that, but that doesn't necessarily help you kind of, I guess, it give you some context from where to relate to those students, but I don't think it'll help you solve problems in your classroom per se. And there are other books. There's one I ran across, like as a white woman teaching black boys, stuff like that. There are books that are out there, but I mean, it's just like, reading a book on how to play trombone. I mean, that you have to kind of get in, get your hands dirty, and experience and ask questions. And so that's what I would say is, when Frank talked to me about this question, I said the easy answer is to love those kids like your kids. I forgot the other thing I said, but love them like they're your kids. Like the kids are kids, ultimately.
Can I ask you a question I'm afraid to ask, Ogechi?
Yeah, please. Oh, okay. Yes, I'm ready.
So when you got your first job as a teacher,
right?
Did your students see you as the woman teacher, the Black teacher, or just a teacher initially?
Well, I think that has everything to do with how I see myself, which is I see myself as a teater first.
I know you do, but I'm just saying,
right.
You walk in the room that first day, what do those kids see?
They I taught in a Black school primarily because it was in Spring, Bama Middle School. I think maybe because there were other Black teachers, a lot of Black teachers on the campus, I think probably as a woman teacher first.
Do you think they saw you as a woman teacher first after you were there for a while? Do they still see the woman, or do they see just the teacher?
Hopefully all the kind of identifiers that would distract from me being just their teacher is something that kind of falls away. Well, and I think ultimately at the end, they saw me as their teacher, because I'm still in touch with those kids to this day.
I've actually thought about this question because I go into a wide variety of schools. And when I'm a guest at a school where it's predominantly Black or Hispanic, I know that at first I am seen, and at least that maybe I'm just self-conscious, but I think I'm perceived first as, okay, this person doesn't look like me.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like that goes away after a while because, like you said, you focus on the kids, and that's what's more important. And I think initially, to go back to the question itself, as a white teacher taking over for a Black teacher, particularly if your predecessor was a beloved person, it may be a while before they see you for yourself without all of those modifiers or adjectives that sometimes compromise how we want to be seen. But that's a tough thing,
It is tough.
And I think right now we're in a climate where that's at the forefront of what everybody's thinking now too.
Right.
It's a great question.
Thomas in the comments wrote, "Be culturally responsive and observe the environment and adapt to the needs of the students." I mean, that's something that every teacher, no matter what situation you're in, that should be the approach ultimately.
Well, and Thomas, if you wouldn't mind sharing your email address in the chat window, I'm sure that would be of tremendous value. Only if you're comfortable with that, of course. But thank you so much. Next question here: how do you manage being a strict teacher when children see strictness as being mean? Oh, all right, Ben.
If procedures are in place, there's really no need to be strict. If you have expectations set up at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the classroom, and you are consistent with those, I haven't found much need to be strict. I maybe pull it out maybe twice a semester. If a kid's getting out of hand and I need to tell them, hey, see me after class, and we have a discussion, I say, what's going on? How can I help? And always coming from a point of there's set procedures, there's a set way of doing things. How do you come into the classroom? Frank, I know you'll probably talk about Chris Pineda here in a second. You do a really good job with that. But I think if they are expected to do the same thing every day, and you are loving them and you respect them, then you won't really run into too many issues.
And you have to be patient too, because people need to get to know you and learn what you're about. And if you tell them why you do things, if you have a rationale behind it, people often buy in. The reason I want you to be silent is because I want you to become the best performer, the best musician you can be. And the only way you can do that is if you pay attention. And maybe that sounds a little bit warm and runny, but you figure out a way to say it so that the kid hears it the way you intend it. So I thought about this too. So this is when we go into a situation and we want to try to alter a behavior that maybe you've inherited. So maybe decide for yourself what defines strict and mean, and then ask them to list those traits in 2 columns on the board. Strict, mean. What are the characteristics? So they learn the distinction. And then ask them on which list is the strict teacher and which list is the mean one. And then have them brainstorm synonyms for strict and guiding them toward the kind of the kindest definition. But tell them, I don't want to be a mean teacher. I do want to be someone with high expectations. And if you tell them that sometimes when you have high expectations, people confuse that with being too strict. And if that's why it's coming off, that's not what I mean at all. I just want you guys to be successful. And when I feel like you're not, I feel like I've got to do a better job. And if sometimes if you just level with them, and be honest with them, let them see the side of you that you want them to see.
Right.
But
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Estelle, I'm sorry, I'm referring to the chat because there's a lot of great information. Estelle put, be authentic with your students and you won't have to be strict. And it's a lot of that's exactly what you were saying, Frank. And because the big thing is if that's not a part of your personhood or your personality, they will see through that a mile away. So there's, so that goes back to establishing those procedures and how you want the classroom to look, and it really explicitly explaining that to your students, like being just upfront and honest with them.
I was go ahead, Ben. Did you have something? I had an experience recently where I came face to face with, I'm not going to do this. I had a wonderful time at this school, and sort of on the spur of the moment, I was asked if I would go work with the music appreciation class. They were doing pickle drumming, pickle barrel drumming.
Oh.
So I was not happy with the structure of this thing. It looked to me like this was not going to go well. So I just started trying to organize the room, and the kids reluctantly spaced themselves out and sat properly. I had them all slide their pickle barrels underneath their chairs. But this one kid leaned back in his chair, folded his arm and I said, please slide your pickle barrel under your chair. And he went. Now at that point, it's game over. Okay? I'm not going to force this. Okay, just let it go. So I just teach around him. I do everything. I start trying to figure out what is a kid going to connect with. So throughout the course of this music appreciation thing, we went into what kind of music do we really appreciate. And I shared with them that I like Radiohead, which kind of shocked them that I even knew who Radiohead was. and we had a conversation among the kids. Many of them interjected about the bands that they liked and why. And then at the end of the class, when things were over and they were all stacking their pickle barrels, I walked over to this kid and I said, I disagree with the way you reacted to me when you refused to do what I asked you to do, but I sure respect you for having the guts to do it. And then he looked at me and said, so what's your favorite Radiohead album?
Whoa. Victory. Yes, got him. Yes.
No, but sometimes you just got to be patient. If you fight fire with fire, you get a bigger fire, right?
That's beautiful. Yes.
That was one of those moments where there was no strategy there. I just went.
You were just trying to connect. You were trying to connect with that kid, man, and that worked. That's
what it all is. And we do have a lot of common ground we stand on. If we just get to know each other, we start to realize, we have a lot more similarities and differences in many ways. Here's a great question. My doubt comes from being a female who is of African descent. I love traditional bands, and I grew up in a military household. I love drum corps and any form of marching music. I'm tired of having to explain that I teach traditional bands. Should I give in and just teach HBCU style bands, or keep pushing to be accepted as a serious director using traditional band techniques? I'm learning Texas UIL processes, and I constantly feel like I'm struggling to be taken seriously where I teach. Non-varsity and varsity ones, but no sweepstakes. Am I good enough to make this happen?
There is a frowny face after that.
There is a frowny face after that one, yeah.
There's a lot to unpack with that, because we're talking about kind of professional doubt and how they see themselves professionally. We're talking about opposing, and I'm going to get to that in a second, marching band styles. I think I want to address the doubt thing first, because that's no one's immune to that. Just like we talked about earlier, no one's immune to that. So if you have first, it's important. It sounds as if you probably don't have like a mentor sort of, or some sort of professional community you can confide into about these answers. And I'm making myself available to you. So, I have my email address that Frank had earlier, and he'll hopefully have it again at the end of this. So reach out to me, and I can direct you to whomever you want to speak to. And Thomas brought up a very good point, which I was going to say. So let's talk about the different styles of marching band that HBCU style developed in the private, the predominantly white institutions. So this is, I think, this could be an opportunity for you to synthesize those styles. They aren't in opposition to each other. If you can, I think there is a way, and I've seen it in the Houston area back in the day, and they're still to some extent doing it, but at Woolridge High School and Fort Bend ISD. Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Oh yeah,
with Ronald Thornton. Man, talk about they could turn it. It's like turning it off and on almost, but doing that HBCU show band kind of swag style band style, and also being able to do kind of the what is maybe not a pejorative term, but like the UIL kind of style, or maybe the core style kind of band. I mean, they could do both. It's like, why not? Why not? Those are just different almost colors of expression of how we can move our bodies and play music and the types of music that we can engage with. I get excited thinking about that. And honestly, I don't think there's enough of that.
I love it.
It's so cool.
They were phenomenal, and I got to go work with that band.
Yeah,
and I will tell you, I had very little to offer them when they were doing the show style. Okay, I commented on a few things, but man, they showed me such respect, and they knew, they understood what they were doing. They understood. And that was such an education for me. There's a school like that in the Dallas Independent School District as well. They have a very show band approach when they're sitting in the stands. They are a completely different band at pregame and in the stands. When they go to that field for halftime to do their UIL show, it's a completely different organization.
Yep.
They managed to flip that switch. I just think that's wonderful. So honestly, I think that there's so much, like you said, Ogechi, to be gained by synthesizing the two or just representing them both.
There you go.
You know what? Excellence is excellence.
Excellence is excellence. Yeah.
Not a function of the style. Right. It's a function of the quality that you impart.
So and if somebody is maybe looking down upon that, or is down upon you as a director for kind of advocating that style, that's honestly their problem, not yours. Yeah. Be what you need to be for your students
and your community.
Your community. Yeah. So that's the other thing. You might need to start tuning the noise out a little bit and focusing on the task at hand, and really maybe assembling for yourself a professional community that you can, similar to this, some people you can ask questions and talk to and confide in and just figure out solutions to these problems. Because this could be an opportunity for you to flex your creative muscle and get your kids just on fire for what they're doing. So yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
This question starts out, by no means am I a phenomenal performer. I often notice myself comparing my talent to the performance majors in my studio, which often leads me to wondering if I'm good enough. Ultimately, can you still be a great teacher if you aren't the best performer? Again, Ben, I think of you.
Oh my God. Well, I was going to say something anyways, and then Frank shot me down. I'm just kidding.
My job.
So, this reminds me of a quote that I heard a couple years ago, and it's comparison is the thief of joy. And, I think if you're comparing yourself to others in an educational way, I think that's great. There's two different ways to look at that quote. It's like you kind of end up comparing yourself to people every day, but you have to look at it as more of, I want to take those qualities of that performer or that person, and I want to make them my own. I want to learn from them. And you turn it as in, I'm excited about their performance, or I'm excited about who they are, and I want to be more like them. You want to constantly surround yourself with people like Ogechi and Frank that you can learn from. I'm in this session last night, and I'm taking notes. I just wrote some notes down in my notebook right now. I'm constantly learning things and surrounding myself with people that are better than me. So you have a great opportunity to do that and grow. And so you need to remind yourself that you're on a path as well, just like everyone else. And it doesn't matter where you are on that path. You have to take those positive aspects of each person and their performance and go work on them. I remember in college, after a recital, I would hop in a practice room and be like, how the heck did they do that? And sometimes I'd even go ask them, like, what did you do? Like, how do you get you slurs to sound that beautiful? And, you know, they would end up, like, my colleagues would end up passing me exercises like, hey, you should do this. And, you know, shout out to Mike Morrow, my horn teacher. He taught me so many things. And I also got things from the people that I was working with and performing with.
I want to reframe this question. So I notice myself comparing my talent to the performance majors in my studio, which often leads to me wondering if I'm good enough. So what if you were surrounded by people who just sucked at what they did? Are you going to let that be a source of joy and accomplishment? You're the shiniest turd in the pile or whatever. You know? I didn't just say. Did I just say that?
You did, but it's
okay.
hopefully
It's
hopefully
been nice
taken
meeting all of you. I've loved my years with Conn-Selmer. Oh my goodness. Anyway, and this is going to be
all
on
your
video.
awards revoked.
Let's go back. Let's undo that right now. I think surrounding yourself with people who are better than you are is a joyful thing. And if it does remind you or point out your shortcomings, again, ask for people, ask for their help, ask for their guidance, ask for their opinion. You may be seeing yourself a little bit more harshly than you may not be being fair to yourself too, you know.
Yes.
Again, and these questions they're so asked in such a vacuum, and I love the questions. So I hope that it at least gives you some kind of direction to go. And just to let you know, I was that comparison junkie too, and it was debilitating at times. It ate at me because I felt like I was supposed to be the best rather than simply pursuing the best. You know, there's a difference between being happy and pursuing happiness. We all have the right to pursue happiness, but we have to find it too, you know. Next question here. With the emphasis so many Texas large schools they place on drum corps experience, how do you break into the quote clique that can form if you don't have that experience? Here it says drum corps experience equals good teaching. And it's so frustrating being passed up by those who could afford to participate in the activity. Yeah, drum corps is not an equal opportunity activity, I'm afraid, because you have to have the money, and that's first. And so when I say equal opportunity, I'm talking about financially available. So it's pretty expensive. As somebody who has hired lots of people, I've never looked at the drum corps background as being a make it or break it thing. I've looked at it as an additional qualification. I know not everybody's like that. Ben, when you were seeking your job, your first job, or your only job, did you find that not having drum corps experience was a problem? And how did you work to fill in that gap, or did you?
Well, going into the interviews, I felt confident because I had so much teaching experience under my belt, even though I didn't have a year of teaching yet. You know, I had done those leadership camps. But I think, to the same importance, I had been teaching at I had been teaching horn lessons at 5 schools, and I had worked with 4 different marching bands and done camps and even just gone out and visited. And I can speak to all these experiences, and I have these mentors. So it's about getting those teaching experiences, having those, presenting those well, but then also having connections of mentors I felt helped tremendously as well. I got, I think I really did get an interview down at Cypress Woods because I had so many connections with the head director, Tom Harrington, who's a great guy, past TBA president, and the people that I grew up with, like Frank and Lynn Jackson and others, Phil Clements, my director in college, like they all had connections with them. So it's about going out, finding experiences, but it's also about it's largely about the people that you know. So DCI, I wanted to go for DCI. I ended up not even auditioning because I wanted that teaching experience that I was able to do over the summer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say real quick that I never did DCI, and to the point of people kind of prioritizing that as a qualification for teaching. If somebody's going to reject you for a job opportunity because you don't have DCI experience and aren't looking at you as like wholly as a teacher, that's probably not an experience you want to be in. I'm just going to be very honest with that. That person, that would want to is hiring you is not looking, I don't think, at a bigger picture. So it's probably not a program you might want to be a part of. So that's a great kind of selection process for you, that you can regard that as a selection process for you. And to go with what Ben said, so what my time was, because I couldn't afford it over the summer. So what my time was spent doing was practicing and teaching and just getting out there and either private lessons or doing like summer school stuff, and just practicing being able to present myself as a teacher and being clear and being concise as much as I can and being articulate. So there are other skills and other opportunities that are out there that, I mean, if we cannot focus on DCI as kind of as a focal point for that. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities out there for you to gain experience so you can be successful going into jobs. So I hope that all makes sense, what I just said.
And I want to add on real quick, we are not discounting DCI, by the way.
No, not at all. I have
both
some
of our
great
answers,
people. Yeah.
A lot of the people that I've taught with it have DCI experience, and I've asked them so many questions.
Same.
It is beneficial, and like Frank was saying, it's an added on.
Yes.
Well, but here's the thing that, Ben, that you said. I want to bring up some focus to this. You said you opted not to do DCI so that you could spend the summer teaching. I mean, when somebody's looking for somebody that has that kind of experience, they're looking for somebody that can bring something that they don't currently have to their staff. So if you've taught at different schools, run different camps, work with marching programs, then you get a letter of support from those people you work with saying, Ben Underbrink is a wonderful marching tech. He's done a great job for us. He's someone that I have the highest confidence in, and I'm very comfortable having worked with our marching band. You can take those into an interview with you. Remember, any shortcoming you have, let me qualify that. Any perceived shortcoming you have, you must work to flip it in your favor. And that doesn't mean necessarily the person that you're trying to flip it with is going to buy into it, but at least you've thought it through and you can make your case.
There we go.
So this question starts out, I hope this makes sense. Most of the teachers I've asked don't quite understand what I'm asking. There are things in the band world that people accept as true. How to create the best tone, how brass players should form their embouchures. The best way to play is to sing first. The best way to play is not to think about technique, but to think about the music, et cetera, et cetera. Or even worse, they just tell you to do things without explaining how. Play louder, play more beautifully, use more air. I am tired of so many interpretations, and I feel I'm lost when it comes to finding the real truth and explanations. In other words, how do you find truth and precise instructions instead of weak suggestions like play more beautifully and opinions? You have to sing in your head while you play, or you will sound horrible. Ooh.
That is also a lot to unpack.
That's a lot to unpack. Because the thing is, like, everything that person was saying as an example, there was an element of truth in it, but what I was trying to think about this, like, I just got, he's sitting here laying on the ground. I had just got a new dog, right? And I'm, training him right now. We're in, and you met him, Frank. Yep. He's a sweetheart.
Not to me, he wasn't, but that's
yeah, but like
keep training, Ogrechi, keep training.
But okay. So the thing is, I'm like I said, I'm training him, and I have like all these books, and I have like these articles that I'm looking at, and what you're talking about would be akin to me giving my dog Gibson these books and saying, hey, like, figure this out, like, there's truth in the book, but the medium is not, like, it doesn't make sense. There's no meaning to him. So I think what the job of a teacher is to be able to, first off, they have to believe in the method or mode or whatever information they're trying to give off. They have to believe that it works to even be able to teach it successfully. So that's a thing, like, try it out. Like, and I don't know if this is a newer teacher, because I mean, there's just a lot to unpack here.
That's the issue, because we don't really know the context.
Yeah.
And Ogrechi, I know you've seen this too, and Ben, I know well, but sometimes when people say, now listen, they don't take listen for, or they use responses in lieu of genuine understanding themselves. So maybe they're frustrated also with their own lack of knowledge. Yeah. Generally, when people get frustrated and default to the same things over and over again, it's because they really don't know what to say. I read something years ago that every angry person is a frightened one, dreading some loss. They're afraid of something. Now,
That's good.
in this situation, you said me the person who asked the question said there are certain things that we all accept as true. How to create the best tone, how brass players should form their embouchures. I don't really agree with that. I think we have multiple ways of approaching those things.
Right.
But the fact that you're in an environment that leads you to believe that, I think, is an indicator of the problem. We've got to get around people with different ideas, different approaches. And I know that as you've clicked through these other sessions around here, you've heard so many different ideas about how to approach things. So I think it's time for you to get outside the perimeters that are surrounding you right now and work to get around some people who with different ideas, who are not teaching to their own limitations. I know I'm presuming a lot because I have no context other than the question itself. So I hope I haven't sounded condescending. But.
No, and I think the questioner is in the chat, and she just said, I'm a college student. Oh. So there's probably just an element of they haven't been able to go out and apply a lot of this information, you know. And
the college teacher is talking right now. Mm-hmm. The college world is full of people who've done the research but have not done the work. I should say they don't have the practical experience. If you want to think of it like this, I mean, you cannot become a pilot until you've been in the simulator and in the cockpit for real. But there are plenty of people out there that are teaching how to teach that really don't have a lot of experience in the classroom doing it. And that's not uncommon, and that's sort of a systemic problem. And I don't mean to throw stones at anything or sound condescending, but that's the reality of it. Mm-hmm. So go out and find people who are doing what you want to do and that are good at it, and watch what they do and work to adopt their methods, and then ask questions of them and build relationships with them.
Yeah.
And speaking of advice, let's this one is, what advice, suggestion, and step would you offer to someone interested in moving into teaching and conducting at a college level concert, wind band, symphony program? Is a DMA a minimum requirement these days? Is it an age barrier? Too old, too young?
Oh, man. Yeah, there's so like, I wish I could talk to these people individually. And actually, I would love to. Yeah. I could. If you want to talk about your specific situation.
You for the email addresses once again?
Yeah. And if you have, I'm going to kind of answer this question as broadly as I can. I'm going to really attempt to do that. But if you want to kind of dig more deeply into your specific situation, please reach out. So I'll start with the last question, which is like too young, too old. I would say, yeah, there's probably a too young, like just kind of going straight through and doing just like, your bachelor's, master's, DMA. I would recommend, it's my recommendation. And I know some people who have gone all the way through and are successful, but that seems to now be becoming more the exception to the rule, to get some teaching experience. Because the thing is, if you want to be a college director, you're going to be teaching students who are going to be teaching out in the field as high school, middle school directors. So being able to give them some practical information from the podium is something I think is extremely valuable. So definitely there's a too young. Now, is there too old? I don't think so. I think it just depends on the program you're looking into.
I got my master's degree when I was 49.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, there's no too old. Like, I think it's just, it depends on the program you're into. Like, if you want to do a full-time thing, if you could do a part-time thing, your family, like where you are. I mean, there's just a ton of factors that, we'd have to kind of parse out if you were to reach out.
If you want to be a conductor now at a major university, you're probably going to have a terminal degree, a DMA.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And certainly at universities like you're at, like the University of Texas, that's going to be a requirement. Yeah. Maybe at some smaller regional schools, maybe not so much, but still those degrees are required if you aspire to that level of the profession.
Master's for sure. Yeah.
There's one more question I'd like to take, and this has been great, guys. We've actually gotten through all the questions that I wanted to get through in this session. Just as a reminder, the Skull session today for the collegiate track is an extension of this questions you're afraid to ask, because I knew we'd have more that we could get to in this 45-minute time slot. That being said, feel free to go wherever you want to, come and go as you like. But this question is, how do you break the ice with kids when you're a volunteer working a sectional or one-on-one and they seem uncomfortable? So they're probably uncomfortable in a way, they may be mirroring your discomfort. Mm-hmm. So let's think about this. So Ogechi, Ben, my name is Mr. Troika. Please sit tall. give me your attention. Show me the best posture you have right now. Instruments up. Let me see your very best hand position, Ogechi. Guys, you look awesome. So maybe that's your icebreaker. Start with something that's structured, that they can do, something they can do, and then give them some praise for doing it, and then say how excited you are to be there to work with them. So I think you don't want to, kids smell fear, and kids are, especially little kids, they're very social. They're always trying to impress their friends. And if one of the ways they can do that is by acting out, they will. Behavior is always driven by some sort of reward for it. So start by, you have to pretend to be a confident teacher until you become one. What is it? It's not fake it till you make it, fake it till you become it, right? Now that's a very short answer. That's not as, again, we're kind of short on time here, but I think the icebreakers, if you play games with kids as icebreakers, I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but in a classroom setting, I'm not sure that's, if you're a volunteer especially, go in there and be the expert, hit the ground running, deliver the instruction, look for moments to offer them genuine praise, offer specific correction, and then praise the corrections they make. And one of my strategies is, when achievement is high, you praise achievement. That's easy. Excellent hand position, beautiful tone quality, Ben. Wonderful, wonderful articulation. That's easy. When achievement is low, what do you do, Ben?
You praise the effort.
You praise effort.
There you go.
Right. When achievement is low, praise effort, because effort is what will get the results. And then when achievement and effort are both low, you just keep teaching. And you open the door and you wait for somebody to walk through that door. When they do something that's praiseworthy, boom, jump on it. So we've got a bunch more questions to get to. If you'd like to submit more to the Google form, you'll find the link at the very top of the chat window. Feel free to submit more questions. Ogechi, Ben, thank you so much. If after all of that screen sharing, you still miss their email addresses, email me. I'll hook you up with them. Thank you all so much. I appreciate all of the comments in the chat window. Maybe I'll get to see you again tonight. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.